"I woke up and found a Apache woman in my room," she said. "I'm just staying here for one night." Normally, his room was filled with soft noises, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the faint sound of cars passing outside, even the occasional chirping of birds outside the window. But today, everything felt still, as if the world outside had paused for a moment. He opened his eyes slowly, stretching under the warm weight of his blanket, and then froze. Sitting near the window was a woman. Not just any woman, but someone he could not recognize at all. Her hair was long and dark, braided with small, colorful threads that shimmered in the sunlight. She wore clothing that looked very traditional, something he had only ever seen in books or history documentaries about Native American tribes. Her dress had patterns woven in red, brown, and yellow, and she had a small feather tied into her braid. She sat with her legs folded beneath her posture straight yet relaxed, as though she belonged to that room even though he had never seen her before. At first he thought he must be dreaming. Maybe he had fallen asleep too late last night while watching TV, and now his mind was playing tricks on him. But no, everything was too real. The sunlight streaming through the window hit the edge of the bed, highlighting the small specks of dust floating in the air. He could see her breathing, slow and calm, and her dark eyes, deep and serious, staring in his direction. She seemed peaceful, but there was also a strange intensity about her, like she carried stories that he could not yet understand. Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaky. He sat up quickly, pulling the blanket around his shoulders, half in fear and half in disbelief. The woman smiled faintly, just enough to ease some of his panic, but not enough to feel ordinary. Her voice was soft, calm, and clear. "I'm just staying here for one night," she said. The words seemed simple, almost casual, but the situation made them feel impossible. He blinked several times, hoping that when he opened his eyes again, she would disappear like a trick of the morning light. But she did not move. She remained exactly where she was, sitting quietly as if she had been waiting for him to wake up. He rubbed his eyes, convinced that this had to be a dream. His mind ran through 1,000 possibilities. Maybe she was a neighbor's guest who had wandered in by mistake. Maybe it was some elaborate prank. Or maybe, just maybe, he had completely lost touch with reality. But she was there. That much he could not deny. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood slowly, unsure whether he should move closer or keep his distance. His heart was racing, each beat echoing loudly in the quiet room. She did not flinch or react to his movement. Instead, she simply tilted her head slightly, as if studying him, measuring his reaction. He felt exposed, as if a stranger could see everything about him in a single glance. Why are you here?" he asked again, his voice more steady now, though still full of tension. The woman shrugged lightly. "I needed a place for the night. That is all," she said. She spoke in a way that made it clear she expected him to accept it, even though it sounded completely impossible. He tried to make sense of her presence, and in doing so, he looked around the room for signs of how she might have entered. The window was closed, the door locked. Nothing was out of place. Yet here she was, calm and composed, sitting on his rug as if she belonged there. He felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Fear, because this was completely unknown. Curiosity, because there was something about her that drew him in. Her calmness, her poise, and the quiet strength in her eyes made it hard for him to just call the police or demand she leave. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, yet it did not feel heavy. It felt alive, charged with the tension of the impossible meeting. Finally, he asked, Do you have a name?" She hesitated slightly before answering. "I am called Little Feather," she said. The name sounded strange and beautiful, like it belonged to a storybook or a legend. He could not stop himself from repeating it in his mind. Little Feather. It felt like a name that carried history, stories, and meaning. He sat back down on the edge of his bed, unsure what to do next. His mind was racing. Who was she? How did she get here? Was she really just going to stay for one night? And why did he feel, for reasons he could not explain, that she was telling the truth? Little Feather, as she had said, did not seem bothered by his questions. She seemed comfortable in his room, sitting quietly, her hands resting lightly on her knees. Every now and then she glanced out of the window, as if listening to something he could not hear. She did not act like a stranger in need of help. She acted like someone who had a purpose, even if that purpose was mysterious. He decided to ask the most obvious question, even though it sounded absurd. "Are you real?" he said, almost laughing at himself for saying it out loud. She smiled faintly again and replied, "I am as real as the sun rising outside your window." Her words made him pause. There was a calm certainty in her tone, a quiet confidence that made him stop questioning her presence for a moment. For the first time that morning, he felt less fear and more awe. He did not understand her, but somehow he felt that this encounter was meant to happen. Hours passed in silence after that. Little Feather did not demand anything. She did not ask for food, water, or comfort. She simply existed in the room, a living presence that felt almost like a bridge between the ordinary world and something older, something ancient. He watched her, trying to memorize every detail. The way the sunlight touched her hair, the patterns on her dress, the way her eyes seemed to reflect 1,000 untold stories. Even though he had been terrified at first, he began to feel a strange peace. There was no danger, only a quiet reminder that life could be mysterious and unpredictable. By the afternoon, he found himself talking to her, almost as if they had known each other before. He asked about her travels, her people, and the meaning of her visit. She answered in a way that was simple yet profound. He began to understand that she was not just a stranger. She was someone who had arrived with a lesson, someone who had chosen him, even if he did not yet know why. As the day turned to evening, he realized something important. This was not a story he would soon forget. The morning had started with confusion, fear, and disbelief, but it was already turning into something extraordinary, a story of human connection, of unexpected encounters, and of learning to open one's mind to the impossible. When he finally went to sleep that night, he did so with Little Feather sitting quietly in the corner of the room. Her presence was no longer frightening. Instead, it felt like a gentle reminder that life could bring surprises, and sometimes those surprises were meant to teach, not to scare. And as he drifted off, he could not help but wonder what the night would bring, what stories Little Feather had carried with her, and why she had chosen his room for this brief but unforgettable visit. The morning after her arrival, he woke up with a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. Even though he had gone to bed feeling somewhat at ease, the thought of Little Feather still lingered in his mind. Who was she really? How had she ended up in his room without any explanation? And why did he feel that this was not just a random occurrence? As he looked around the room, he saw her sitting quietly near the window, her hands folded in her lap, gazing at the soft light spilling across the floor. She seemed peaceful, calm, and yet there was an intensity in her eyes that suggested she had stories that could fill a lifetime. He cleared his throat and decided to take a risk. "Can you tell me where you come from?" he asked, his voice gentle, trying not to sound accusatory. Little Feather turned her gaze toward him, her eyes reflecting a depth of experience that made him feel small and ordinary in comparison. "I come from a place far from here," she said. "A place where the land speaks, where the wind carries stories of our ancestors, and where every living thing is respected. I am Apache, from a community that has lived for centuries with the earth as our teacher." He listened carefully, fascinated. He had learned about Native American tribes in school, but he had never imagined meeting someone from that world, right in his own home. He had expected her to be just a stranger, perhaps even someone lost or in need of help. But as she spoke, it became clear that she was not lost. She was here with purpose. "Why are you here then? Why my room?" he asked, curiosity overriding his initial fear. She paused for a moment as if choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, journeys lead us to people who are ready to listen, who are ready to understand. You were not expecting me, but perhaps your heart was ready to meet me. I do not need much, just a night, just a space to rest, and in return I offer stories, lessons, and truth. Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. He felt a strange mixture of wonder and responsibility. He was hosting a stranger who could have been anyone, but instead she was offering wisdom. The thought was humbling, almost frightening, yet impossible to ignore. For the next few hours, they talked quietly. Little Feather shared stories of her childhood in the Apache community, stories of her family, and the lessons her elders had taught her. She spoke about living with nature, about listening to the animals, and about understanding the signs that the world gives to those who pay attention. He listened in silence, fascinated. He had never heard stories like these in his ordinary life. In his world, people were always in a rush, always looking at screens or checking schedules. But she spoke of patience, of quiet observation, and of learning from the smallest things. He could almost see the desert lands and the mountains she described, feel the wind on his skin, and hear the rustle of leaves in the trees. As she spoke, he began to notice small details about her that made her feel even more real. The way her hands moved gently as she described the dances of her people, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her younger brother, the subtle pauses in her voice that showed respect for the stories themselves. Everything about her suggested that she was deeply connected to her history, to her culture, and to the world around her. At one point, he asked her about her journey to his city. "How did you come here? Did someone help you? Did you travel far?" Little Feather smiled softly. "I came alone. The path was not easy, but every step taught me something. The world has a rhythm, and if you follow it with respect and patience, it guides you. I did not choose this place randomly. The path brought me here to your room for reasons that will become clear in time." Her words made him reflect on his own life. He had always believed in planning, in control, in knowing exactly what the next step would be. Yet here was someone who had arrived in his room without notice, without explanation, and yet her presence felt meaningful, almost destined. It made him wonder how much of life he had been missing by trying to control everything. They spent the day in quiet conversation, but it was more than words. She taught him to notice things he had ignored for years, the way sunlight fell through the blinds, the patterns of shadows on the floor, the sound of his own breathing. Every observation became a lesson in presence, in being fully alive in the moment. He found himself opening up to her in ways he had not expected. He talked about his fears, his doubts, and the pressures he faced in his life. He spoke of his work, his family, and the loneliness he sometimes felt, even when surrounded by people. She listened without judgment, nodding and offering small words of guidance. "You carry many burdens," she said softly, "but remember, every challenge is a teacher. Sometimes it is not the world that burdens you, but your own mind. Learn to listen to yourself and the answers will come." He was struck by the simplicity and truth in her words. She did not offer solutions, only perspective, yet that perspective felt powerful. It was as if her presence alone was enough to shift his thinking, to open a door he had kept closed for years. As the afternoon turned into evening, he noticed a change in himself. The fear he had felt the night before had faded, replaced by curiosity, respect, and a deep sense of wonder. He was no longer thinking about how she got there or why. He was thinking about what he could learn from her, and how rare it was to meet someone who could share such insights so freely. Little Feather remained quiet for periods, and he began to understand that silence was part of her teaching. She was not just filling the space with stories. She was allowing him to experience the stillness, to feel the world around him in a way he had forgotten. In her silence, he could hear the ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a bird calling outside. And in that silence, he began to feel a sense of calm he had never known. He watched her as the sun began to set. The golden light illuminated her face, highlighting the soft lines of her features and the gentle intensity in her eyes. She seemed timeless, almost like a figure from a painting or a storybook, yet completely real. He realized that he had been given a rare gift, the opportunity to see the world through someone else's eyes, even if just for a brief time. When night fell, the room was bathed in a soft glow from the streetlights outside. He could see the quiet determination in her movements as she prepared a small space for herself to rest. She did not demand anything from him, did not ask for anything beyond what he could offer. She simply existed in his room, a living reminder that life could be full of mystery, learning, and unexpected encounters. Before he went to bed, he asked her one last question for the night. "Do you ever get lonely?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Loneliness is part of life, yes, but we are never truly alone. There are always stories, always lessons, always connections waiting for us. Sometimes we meet someone briefly and it changes everything. Perhaps this is such a moment for both of us." He lay down in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything he had heard and experienced in just one day. Fear, curiosity, awe, respect, and wonder, all mixed together in a way he could not easily describe. He realized that Little Feather was not just a stranger. She was a teacher, a guide, and perhaps even a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he had ignored for too long. As he drifted to sleep, he knew that this day would stay with him forever. He had met someone extraordinary, someone who had stepped into his life for just one night, and yet had already taught him more than he could have imagined. He did not know what tomorrow would bring or what other lessons she might share, but he felt a deep sense of gratitude. And even in his dreams, he could feel her presence, calm and steady, reminding him that life was full of surprises, and that sometimes the most meaningful encounters came when least expected. The night had settled into a quiet calm, but for him, sleep was far away. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the gentle rhythm of Little Feathers breathing in the corner of the room. It was not the sound of someone sleeping, but a sound of presence, steady, quiet, and unshakably calm. Every now and then she shifted slightly, her movements soft and deliberate, almost as if she were moving in time with some secret rhythm of the world. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I still don't understand. Why are you here? Why me?" She opened her eyes slowly, looking at him with the same quiet intensity that had first startled him in the morning. "Because you were ready," she said simply. "Sometimes we meet people not because they are lost, but because they are ready to learn. And sometimes we meet strangers because they carry wisdom we need to hear." He had never thought of life in that way before. For him, encounters were mostly routine. People came and went, and most meetings had no deeper meaning. But here was someone who claimed that every meeting mattered, that each encounter could teach a lesson if he was willing to listen. It was both comforting and challenging at the same time. "I don't even know what I need to learn," he admitted, almost ashamed. "I've never been good at understanding things like this." Little Feather smiled faintly, the kind of smile that seemed to hold years of patience and understanding. "Understanding does not always come quickly," she said. "It grows slowly like a seed. Sometimes all you need is someone to guide you even for a short time to help you see what is already inside you." He sat up in bed, feeling both curious and nervous. "Can you teach me something?" he asked. "Something real, something I can understand." She nodded. "Yes. But you must promise to listen, not just with your ears but with your heart. You must notice everything, even the smallest details, because that is where life teaches its most important lessons." He agreed without hesitation, eager to learn, even if he did not know what to expect. For the next few hours, she guided him in ways he could not have imagined. First, she asked him to close his eyes and listen, to the wind outside, to the faint hum of the city, to the tiny sounds he had never noticed before. At first, he could hear almost nothing, just the distant traffic and the faint rustle of leaves. But with her gentle prompting, he began to notice patterns, rhythms, and small details he had always ignored. "Life is full of messages," she explained softly. "The wind can tell you where to go, the birds can teach you timing, and even silence can speak. But only if you pay attention." He had never thought of silence as something meaningful before. In his world, silence was usually uncomfortable, something to be filled with noise, music, or conversation. But here, with Little Feather, silence became alive. It carried lessons, stories, and guidance that he could almost feel rather than hear. Next, she guided him to notice his own body and thoughts. "Feel your heartbeat," she said. "Notice your breathing. Do not rush it. Do not fight it, just be aware. This is the first step in understanding yourself." He tried, awkwardly at first. His heart raced, and his thoughts jumped from one thing to another, from work deadlines to groceries to the strange situation he found himself in. But she did not judge. She simply waited patiently, letting him struggle, guiding him with soft words and subtle gestures. Slowly, his mind began to calm. He began to notice the rise and fall of his chest, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the gentle way his mind could settle if he allowed it. "Most people live their lives unaware," she said. "They rush, they worry, they ignore what is inside and around them. But awareness brings freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from unnecessary worry, freedom to live fully." He listened, fascinated. For the first time, he realized that life was not just about doing, achieving, or planning. Life was also about noticing, listening, and understanding. And here was someone who had arrived in his room, a complete stranger, showing him how to do just that. As the night deepened, Little Feather shared stories from her childhood. She spoke of waking up before sunrise, feeling the first light on the desert sand, and listening to the world as it stirred. She told him about her elders, who taught her patience, humility, and respect for all living things. She spoke of lessons learned from animals, the way an eagle could show focus, how a wolf could show loyalty, and how even the smallest creatures carried wisdom if one paid attention. He listened intently, imagining each story as if he were there with her, walking through the desert, feeling the wind on his face, and hearing the sounds of nature all around him. He felt transported, as if the room itself had become a bridge to another world. At one point, she asked him to try something. "Go to the window," she said. "Look at the night sky. Do not just see the stars, feel them, let them speak to you." He hesitated, but then he walked to the window. The sky was clear, filled with countless stars that blinked softly against the dark expanse. At first, it seemed ordinary, just a familiar night sky. But as he focused, as Little Feather had instructed, he began to notice patterns. The clusters of stars forming shapes, the gentle movement of the sky as the earth turned, the way the light of distant suns reached him after traveling for years. "They are older than you can imagine," she whispered, "and yet they exist for you in this moment. Life is like this, ancient, vast, and yet immediate. You are part of it. You cannot see it all at once, but if you pay attention, you can feel it." He felt a strange mix of awe and humility. Here he was, standing in his small room, yet feeling connected to the entire universe. He had never experienced anything like it, and he realized that her lessons were not just about nature. They were about life itself, about perspective, patience, and understanding. Hours passed like minutes. They spoke, they listened, they observed. He asked questions about her people, her traditions, and the meaning behind her words. She answered, always carefully, always with the intent to teach rather than impress. Every story, every lesson, felt like a small window opening in his mind, revealing parts of life he had never considered before. At one point, he realized he was smiling without thinking about it. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. Fear, confusion, and doubt had melted away, replaced by curiosity, wonder, and gratitude. "You've changed something in me," he said quietly, almost afraid to speak the truth. "I don't even know how, but I feel lighter, calmer, like I can see things differently." Little Feather smiled again, the kind of smile that seemed to carry generations of wisdom. "That is the gift of awareness," she said. "It is not I who changed you. It is your own willingness to see, to listen, and to understand. I am only a guide, a mirror showing what is already inside you." The night went on, and though they did not sleep, he did not feel tired. The lessons were not just words. They were experiences, moments of understanding, and a deep connection forming between them. He realized that life could be extraordinary if one only took the time to notice, to listen, and to be present. By the early hours of the morning, he felt a shift inside himself. The fear he had felt when he first saw her had completely vanished. In its place was a sense of wonder, respect, and a quiet determination to live more mindfully. He understood at least a little that her visit was more than coincidence. It was a moment meant to teach, to awaken, and to transform. Little Feather finally settled into a small space near the window, preparing to rest. She did not ask for food, water, or comfort. She had come with a purpose, and that purpose had been carried out through her presence, her stories, and her guidance. As he lay down, he reflected on everything that had happened in just one night. He had met someone extraordinary, a woman from a world he had never known, and yet everything she said felt intimately connected to his own life. He realized that he had learned more about himself and the world in a few hours than he had in many years of ordinary routine. And though sleep finally claimed him, he did so with a new understanding, that sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected visitors, from strangers who carry wisdom, and from moments that seem ordinary at first but turn out to be life-changing. He drifted off with a quiet sense of gratitude, feeling that this night would stay with him forever. Little Feather's presence, calm and steady, had not only taught him about the world outside but also about the world inside, a world he had ignored for too long but would never forget again. The morning light crept softly through the curtains, spilling across the room in warm, golden streams. He woke slowly, still feeling the quiet calm of the night before clinging to him like a gentle blanket. The presence of Little Feather was still there, though she was sitting quietly in a corner, her posture calm and deliberate as always. The room felt different somehow, lighter, more open, and somehow more alive. He sat on the edge of his bed, not moving immediately, not wanting to break the delicate stillness that had settled over the room. The night's lessons, the stories, the silent moments of reflection, all seemed to have changed him. He felt a strange mixture of sadness and gratitude, knowing that today might be the day she left. The thought of losing this calm presence made his chest tighten. Finally he spoke, his voice soft, almost reverent. "Will you leave today?" Little Feather looked at him with her calm, steady gaze. "Yes," she said simply. "All journeys end and all meetings have their time. I came for one night as I promised. My time here is complete." He nodded, though his heart felt heavy. "I understand," he said, though part of him didn't. He wanted to ask her to stay longer, to teach him more, to continue sharing her calm and wisdom, but he also felt that to ask would be wrong. She was not here to satisfy his curiosity or comfort his life. She was here to share, to guide, and to leave when her purpose was complete. For a long while they sat in silence, the kind of silence that no longer felt empty. He watched her carefully, noticing every small detail. The way her hands rested gently on her knees, the soft lines of her face illuminated by the morning sun, the steady rhythm of her breathing. He realized he had spent so much of his life rushing past moments like this, never noticing, never appreciating the beauty of simple presence. She finally spoke, breaking the silence in the gentlest way. "Do you understand now, even a little, why I came?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "I think I do. You came to remind me to see things, to notice, to listen, to slow down, and to remember that life has lessons everywhere, even in moments I never expected." She nodded slightly, her expression serene. "That is all I could hope for. The rest is yours to discover. Life will continue to teach you, and now you will notice it. That is the true gift." He felt a lump in his throat. Words seemed inadequate to express the depth of his feelings. He wanted to thank her, to ask her questions, to keep her here just a little longer, but he knew that was not the way. Instead, he simply nodded, trying to convey everything through that single gesture. Little Feather stood slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. She did not rush, did not hesitate. She walked to the window and gazed outside for a moment, as if taking in the city and the sky, committing it to memory. Then she turned back to him. "Before I leave," she said softly, "there is one last thing I want to share." He listened intently, leaning forward slightly, feeling the weight of her words before she even spoke. "Life is like this room," she said. "It may seem ordinary, familiar, and small, but if you pay attention, every corner holds lessons. Every shadow, every ray of light, every quiet moment carries meaning. Do not rush past them. Do not ignore them. Cherish them, and you will find peace." He nodded, feeling a tear slip down his cheek. He had never been moved so deeply by the words of a stranger before. There was something timeless about her presence, something that felt bigger than the room, bigger than the city, bigger even than himself. She walked to the door, and he followed instinctively, as if drawn by some invisible thread. She paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly on the doorknob. She looked back at him, her gaze full of understanding and kindness. "Remember," she said, "not all visitors come to stay. Some come to remind, some come to teach. And some come to help you see what you could not see alone. I am one of those visitors, and now my time is complete." He swallowed hard, struggling to find words. I will never forget this," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that felt like warmth on a cold day. "I hope not. That is the gift I leave with you. Remember it, and your life will be richer for it." With that, she opened the door and stepped into the hallway. He watched silently as she walked down the corridor, her steps calm, measured, and purposeful. He wanted to call her back, to ask her to stay longer, to explain how much she had changed him already. But he knew that would be wrong. She had come with a purpose, and part of her wisdom was knowing when to leave. The sound of her footsteps faded, and soon she was gone. The room felt suddenly empty, quieter than before, yet in a strange way it also felt fuller. The lessons, the stories, the presence, they had left an imprint on him that could not be erased. He could still feel her here, in the way the sunlight fell on the floor, in the quiet spaces between the ticking clock and the distant hum of the city, in the calm that had settled deep inside him. He walked back to the window where she had stood and gazed outside. The city seemed different now. Not the same noisy, hurried place he had always known, but a place full of potential, full of moments to notice, to cherish, and to learn from. Even the faint rustle of leaves in the wind seemed to carry meaning. Sitting back down on the bed, he reflected on everything that had happened. One night, just one night, and yet it had changed him in ways he could not fully explain. He had learned to listen, to notice, to be present, and to appreciate the quiet moments that often passed unnoticed. He had learned that encounters, even brief ones, could carry profound meaning. As he thought about Little Feather, he realized that her visit had not been about her at all. It had been about him, about opening his eyes to a world he had ignored, about helping him see the lessons in life that were always there, waiting for someone willing to notice. He remembered her stories of her people, the lessons of nature, the importance of patience, humility, and respect. He remembered the way she had guided him to listen to the wind, the stars, and his own heartbeat. He remembered the quiet presence that had filled the room, teaching without words, teaching simply by being. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, gratitude for her presence, for her lessons, for the reminder that life was richer than he had ever realized. He also felt a quiet sadness, knowing that such encounters were rare and that he might never meet her again. But alongside the sadness was a firm determination to carry her teachings with him, to notice the world more fully, and to live with awareness, patience, and respect. He stood up and walked around the room, taking in every detail as if seeing it for the first time. The sunlight streaming through the window, the faint pattern of dust in the air, the soft hum of the refrigerator, everything seemed alive, vibrant, and meaningful. He realized that this was the gift Little Feather had left behind, a new way of seeing, a new way of living, a new way of being. Before leaving the room for the day, he paused by the door, placing his hand lightly on the doorknob, almost expecting her to appear once more. But she did not. He smiled softly to himself, feeling a mix of sorrow and joy. She was gone, but the lessons, the presence, and the quiet wisdom remained. He knew that life would continue, as it always did, with its routines, its noise, and its challenges. But he also knew that he would carry this night with him forever. Every time he noticed the wind, the sunlight, or the quiet moments in his day, he would remember Little Feather, and he would remember the gift of awareness she had left behind. And as he closed the door behind him, stepping into the world that suddenly seemed richer, fuller, and more alive, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He understood now that some visitors come only to remind us, to teach us, and then to leave. And sometimes, the briefest encounter can change a life forever. The morning after Little Feather had left, he woke up feeling a strange mix of emptiness and clarity. Her presence was gone, yet the lessons, the stories, and the calm she had brought remained, lingering like a soft echo in his mind. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the empty corner where she had rested, and tried to process everything that had happened. He remembered the first moment he had seen her, sitting near the window, calm and composed, wearing the traditional dress of her people. He had been terrified at first, unsure if he was dreaming or awake, and yet now that fear felt distant, almost unreal. What remained was awe, curiosity, and a quiet gratitude that he had been fortunate enough to meet her, even if only for a single night. As he moved through his morning routine, he noticed the world differently. The sunlight streaming through the window felt warmer, the sounds of the city softer, and even the faint hum of his refrigerator seemed less ordinary. He realized he had been moving through life in a haze, barely noticing the details that made each day unique. Little Feather had taught him to slow down, to notice, to listen, and to see meaning in the smallest moments. Over the next few days, he found himself reflecting on her words constantly. He remembered her lessons about listening to the world around him, about being present, and about noticing what others often overlooked. He remembered her stories about her people, about patience, humility, and respect for life. And he remembered the way she had guided him to see the beauty in silence, to appreciate the rhythms of nature, and to understand that life's most profound lessons were often simple and subtle. He began to apply these lessons in his daily life. At first, it was small changes. He noticed the way the sunlight hit his desk in the morning, the sound of birds outside his window, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. He paid attention to his own breathing, his heartbeat, and the quiet moments he had once ignored. Slowly, these small observations began to bring a sense of peace he had never experienced before. He also began to notice the people around him differently. He listened more carefully to their words, observed their gestures, and tried to understand the feelings behind their expressions. Conversations became richer, more meaningful, because he was truly present instead of distracted by his own thoughts or the constant rush of life. He realized that life was not just about completing tasks or achieving goals. It was about connecting, noticing, and understanding. One afternoon, He found himself thinking back to the night when Little Feather had guided him to the window to observe the stars. He remembered how she had asked him to feel the stars, to understand their age, their light, and their connection to the universe. He went outside and looked up at the night sky, and for the first time, he felt a deep sense of connection to something greater than himself. The city around him, the people, the traffic, and the noise all seemed smaller compared to the vastness of the universe. And yet, he felt part of it, a small but meaningful piece of a much larger story. The lessons she had shared about patience and awareness also began to influence his decisions. He found himself pausing before reacting in stressful situations, taking a moment to breathe, observe, and consider. Work challenges, personal conflicts, and everyday frustrations no longer overwhelmed him as they once had. Instead, he approached them with calm clarity and a sense of balance that he had never known before. He also began keeping a small journal, writing down his thoughts, observations, and reflections. Inspired by Little Feather's stories and her teachings, he recorded moments of beauty, lessons learned from nature, and insights about his own life. Each entry became a reminder of her visit, a way to continue the guidance she had given him, and a way to carry her wisdom into the future. Friends and family noticed a change in him as well. He seemed calmer, more patient, and more attentive. He listened more and judged less. He shared stories about small moments of beauty he had noticed, about lessons he had learned from observing life, and about the importance of slowing down and appreciating the present. Though he did not mention Little Feather directly, her influence was clear in his actions and his words. As weeks passed, he realized that her visit had not just been about one night, it had been about transformation. He had learned to see life in a new way, to appreciate moments that would have once gone unnoticed, and to value connection, awareness, and presence above distraction, fear, or worry. Her visit had been brief, but its impact was lasting, shaping the way he approached every day. He also began to understand that not every visitor in life came to stay. Some came to teach, some came to guide, and some came to remind. Little Feather had been all of these, and she had left a lasting imprint on his mind, heart, and spirit. He felt gratitude that was difficult to express in words, but he knew he carried it in every step, every breath, and every action he took. One evening, as he sat quietly by the window, he remembered her final words. "Not all visitors come to stay. Some come to remind. Some come to teach. And some come to help you see what you could not see alone." He realized that her visit had been exactly that, an awakening, a gentle nudge, and a reminder that life was full of lessons if he was willing to see them. He reflected on the importance of sharing what he had learned. Little Feather had shared her wisdom freely, expecting nothing in return. He felt that part of honoring her visit was to carry her lessons forward, to live them, and to share them with others through example. He started being more attentive to friends who were struggling, offering calm guidance, listening more deeply, and helping them notice the small lessons life offered. Even ordinary moments became extraordinary. Walking through the park, he noticed the sunlight filtering through the trees, the laughter of children, the patterns of clouds in the sky, and the songs of birds he had once ignored. He found joy in these details, and he realized that happiness was not always about grand events or achievements, but about being present and noticing life as it unfolded. Months passed, and though he never saw Little Feather again, her presence remained with him. Her lessons had become part of him, shaping the way he thought, acted, and perceived the world. He found that even small, routine actions carried meaning when done with attention and awareness. He cooked meals more mindfully, appreciated simple conversations, and noticed the beauty in small gestures of kindness from others. One quiet evening, as he reflected on the journey that had begun with one night, he realized that life had changed in ways he could never have predicted. A stranger had entered his room, shared her wisdom, and left without fanfare, yet the impact had been profound. He understood now that life's most meaningful moments often came unexpectedly, and that sometimes the briefest encounters could change a life forever. He smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace. Little Feather had reminded him that life was full of lessons, connections, and beauty waiting to be noticed. He carried her teachings with him, not as burdens or rules, but as gentle reminders to live fully, observe carefully, and appreciate every moment. As he prepared for bed that night, he glanced at the corner of the room where she had once rested. It was empty, yet full of memory, presence, and meaning. He felt gratitude once more, knowing that life could bring the extraordinary even in the most ordinary places, and that every encounter, no matter how brief, had the power to transform. And as he drifted into sleep, he held her lessons close, feeling that even though she was gone, Little Feather's presence would guide him forever, teaching him patience, awareness, and the quiet beauty of life that too many people overlooked. He had learned that life was not just about rushing through days, but about noticing, listening, and appreciating the moments that often passed unnoticed. Her visit had been brief, just one night, yet it had given him a lifetime of insight, shaping the way he would live, love, and see the world from that day forward.